Hey guys, welcome to another episode of True Crimes and Weird Times. I'm Kim.
I'm Ashley.
And today I'm going to be telling you about Cindy James, a Canadian woman who was harassed, stalked, and attacked for 7 years until her death. But police think she was making the whole thing
Check out
up.
our Patreon for bonus episodes and more.
And if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Bye.
Cindy James was born June 12, 1944 in Oliver, British Columbia. She was the daughter of Otto and Matilda Hack and was the oldest of 6 children. She graduated from nursing school in 1966, and she loved being a nurse. But she also loved to counsel children with emotional problems. So it wasn't long before she became an administrator at a preschool for children with behavioral and emotional disorders. Cindy was a beautiful girl with a huge heart, and she was full of life. She married Dr. Roy Makepeace, who...
I love that name, by the way.
Right?
Especially for who she was.
Who was a psychiatrist and also 18 years older than her.
Ah.
So he was 37 when he married 19-year-old Cindy.
Wow.
I know, that's a pretty big age gap.
Yeah.
The couple never had any children, and Cindy eventually filed for divorce in July of 1982 when she was 38 years old.
Wow, so they had a long marriage.
They did. They were married for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think she just kind of got to the point where she wanted to move on with her life. And
Yeah, well, I mean, she was young when she got married.
Right.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah. But 4 months after the couple separated, Cindy started getting mysterious phone calls. And these phone calls would be the beginning of 7 years of stalking and harassment towards Cindy.
Ooh.
She told her parents about the calls, saying sometimes it was a voice, sometimes the sound of the voice would be a little different, sometimes it was whispering, and sometimes it was just silence.
Oh, that's even worse.
I know.
Ugh.
Eventually, the calls became threatening, and Cindy went and reported them to the police, who opened an investigation.
Good.
Cindy was also receiving death threats in the mail at this point.
Oh, my God.
Her friends and family could see the toll this was already taking on Cindy, because she was, once lively and happy, but she was becoming just more and more tired and withdrawn.
Yeah,
and
she's scared for her life.
Yeah, you're getting threatening phone calls and letters and...
Now, did it say what was in the phone calls or letters?
Nothing super specific. I don't know about the mailed letters, but it switched up later, and we do know a little more about the later messages. So
okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
It didn't take long for the calls and letters to turn into much more sinister events.
Oh, of course.
Cindy reported hearing prowlers outside her house at night.
And did she live alone?
She did.
Oh, okay. Ugh.
One night, her porch lights were all smashed, and when she tried to call the police, she found that her phone lines had been cut.
Oh, my God.
Cindy also found 3 dead cats hanging in her garden, some of which had strings tied around their neck, and nearby there was a note left that said, "You're next." Soon after this, strange and threatening notes began appearing on her doorstep rather than in the mail. Usually it was made with letters cut out of magazines.
Oh, okay.
And they would paste strange pictures, or they would kind of handwrite with it. We'll post a few pictures of some of these notes on our social media, but they're really bizarre.
Ugh.
Cindy told her friend Agnes Woodcock on many occasions that she didn't believe this person wanted to kill her. She thought he just wanted to scare her to death.
That sounds to me like he wanted to kill her.
Yeah, but he wasn't trying it.
Yeah, it was taking a long time.
But after this, the first physical attack occurred.
Oh.
On the night of January 22nd, 1983, Cindy's friend Agnes had dropped by Cindy's house for a visit, but she didn't get an answer when she knocked on the door. Mm-hmm. And now Cindy was known to take really long baths in the evening, which I can totally relate to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So at first, Agnes just assumed, she didn't answer the door, she's in the bathtub.
Yeah.
But then she heard a noise, and she didn't really know what it was, so she headed around to the back of the house to check on it, and that's where she found Cindy crouched down like she was trying to hide with a black nylon stocking tied tightly around her neck.
Oh, my God.
Cindy told Agnes that she had gone out to her garage to get a box, and she was grabbed from behind. All she saw was white sneakers.
Ooh.
Cindy believed that Agnes arriving actually scared the perpetrator away, and that's how Cindy was able to run out of the garage and hide in the backyard.
Oh, wow.
And after this first attack, the harassment just continued. Cindy had threatening messages left on the windshield of her car, including one with a picture of a corpse being taken into a morgue.
Ew.
She started receiving deliveries of raw meat to her home, which to me is one of the more bizarre tactics.
Yeah.
I mean, I get the message, literal dead meat.
Yeah.
But, to me, it's just a really strange way to send a threat, I guess.
It seems like a big waste of money to do it that way.
It does. It does. Meat's expensive.
Yeah.
But, anybody who's doing these things to another person probably isn't going to be very logical.
Right.
Cindy also returned to her house once to find her dog, Heidi, shaking with fear, sitting in her own feces with a cord wrapped tightly around her neck.
Poor baby.
Now, the harassment would come and go. It wasn't solid the entire time. For a period, she would receive threats and harassment almost daily, but then it would be followed by, long stretches of time where nothing would happen.
Huh.
But then it would eventually start up again.
Right.
And every time it stopped for a while, I'm sure that all she could think about was, when is it going to come back again?
That would be the most aggravating.
Just waiting for the next call, the next letter, and as soon as you let your guard kind of go down, it's going to start again.
And maybe that was the idea.
Probably. I mean, it just, whew. And then, you combine it with everything else, and Cindy was, rightfully super traumatized by what she was going through here. So Cindy decided to stop waiting around for police to catch this guy and do something to protect herself.
Good for her.
So she moved to a new house. She painted her car.
Oh, wow.
She changed her last name. And she also hired a private investigator named Ozzy Caban. Now, this wasn't because police weren't investigating, because they actually were. They were doing all they could do for her at the time, but they were also starting to doubt Cindy's stories.
Huh.
After the attack, they questioned Cindy several times, but according to Ozzy, she would be evasive and withhold information, and she just really didn't act like a typical victim would be expected to act.
Huh.
Which in itself, how many times have we said it? No one reacts to trauma the same way, but it doesn't mean it isn't a real reaction.
Right. But if it's the police, I would be telling them everything. I wouldn't be withholding anything for sure.
Well, as for, the withholding information, Cindy's mother actually believes it was because the person stalking her had threatened the rest of her family.
Oh.
Cindy was afraid that if she gave away too much of what she really knew, her mother and her sister would also be in danger.
Okay, I can kind of see that then.
Her mother says that after one of the attacks, a knife was held to Cindy's throat, and she was told that if she talked, her sister and her mother would be next.
Oh.
But also, police had yet to find a single piece of evidence left from her stalker. No fingerprints, no hair, no footprints, nothing.
Wow.
It was like he was a ghost.
Huh.
Which contributed to them really not believing her.
I see it both ways.
I know. That's the hardest
strange.
part about this case. Her private investigator, Ozzy, installed extra lights at Cindy's house. He also gave her a two-way radio with a panic button so that she could call him anytime she needed help.
Yeah.
And police were also doing surveillance on her house on a pretty regular basis. One night, Ozzy heard some strange sounds coming through the radio, so he rushed over to Cindy's house. And when he got there, the front door was locked. So Ozzy went around looking in the windows until he finally spotted her lying on the floor in the hallway. She wasn't moving.
Okay.
So Ozzy goes back to the front of the house and kicks in the door. When he gets to her, at first he thinks she's dead.
Well, yeah.
But she's actually just unconscious. She's lying on the floor with a paring knife through her hand.
Oh, my God.
And a note, like, you stab a note to something.
Yeah.
He'd stabbed the note through the knife as well.
Oh, no.
And the note said, "You are dead, bitch."
Oh, my God.
Ozzy found a pulse, made sure she was alive, and then he immediately calls for 911. And it only took him just a couple of minutes to get there. And Cindy did wake up briefly before being taken to the hospital. So he knew she was, going to be okay.
Right.
So Ozzy went to the hospital later to interview her. And she told them that she had noticed a man coming through the gate. And the next thing she remembered was being hit on the side of the head with a piece of wood or something similar. Then she remembered being held down on the floor and a needle going into her arm. And then nothing until she woke up. She had absolutely no memory of the knife going through her hand at all.
Oh, wow.
Or so she said. Police, however, just don't buy it. In fact, by this point, they're so skeptical of Cindy's stories that they don't even check for fingerprints in the house or on the knife or the note.
Oh, what?
Nothing.
So, I mean, even if they think that Cindy did it to herself, I assume, they could check for fingerprints against hers.
That's what I said. Like, if you think she's doing this to herself, then wouldn't finding only her fingerprints on the knife prove that for you? But no, they're just like, we're fed up with this lady. We'll do what we have to do, but we're not going to go above and beyond.
Wow.
So they just believe that Cindy staged the whole incident and that she had done all of these things to herself. Ozzy, however, firmly believed that Cindy was really attacked. He did not believe that Cindy would have been able to inject or stab herself at the angles that the needle and the knife entered her body.
Oh.
So
that was my next question. I mean, did they even check to see?
I'm not sure what angle a needle going into your arm would be. Hard to do. That one seems a little iffy to me.
Right.
But the knife in the hand, I guess there would be some way, like if you're leaning across yourself to stab yourself. I mean,
and then, like, remember Danny Castellero? They were saying that maybe he could do that and he would have to lean over himself to cut his arm. So,
right.
I mean, there would be particular angles.
After this attack, Cindy wanted to try and remember more so that she could provide more information to the police, and she agreed to undergo both hypnosis and a polygraph test. However, it was pretty quickly determined that Cindy was just too traumatized to be able to give any useful information or be a good candidate for hypnosis. Yeah. And Cindy actually ended up taking 2 polygraph tests, both of which came back inconclusive and seemed to indicate that she was holding back information.
Wow. But that can also be because she felt her family was threatened.
It could be. And also, I mean, if you're just nervous, you can fail these tests. So, I mean, there's a reason you can't use them in court.
Right.
After this, the threatening phone calls continued and police upped their surveillance on her house. They would set up at her home for 24 hours at a time, sometimes with as many as 14 different officers.
Oh, wow.
They had set her phone up to trace calls, but the calls were always too short to trace.
Well, that she couldn't be doing by herself, right? This was the 80s. It wasn't like they had cell phones.
Right. That's true. But those phone calls never came in when police were there. Every time they came and set up surveillance and had officers posted, everything would stop. There would be no notes, no calls, no prowlers, nothing. And then when the surveillance would end,
it would start
everything would start again.
That's so weird.
Now, obviously, this doesn't help with police believing Cindy.
Right.
However, Cindy's mother said that, of course, nothing happened when the police were there. They were not being very subtle about it. And if you're stalking someone, you obviously know there are police cars outside their house and, probably stay away from them.
Yeah.
And it also happened that Cindy was dating a police officer at the time named Pat McBride, but he was not investigated as a possible suspect or anything at the time, and her home was never checked for any listening devices.
That's weird.
On December 11th, 1985, Cindy was found dazed and semi-conscious in a ditch over 6 miles away from her house.
Oh, wow.
She was suffering from hypothermia. She was found wearing a man's work boot and a glove, and she had a black nylon stocking tied around her neck.
Huh.
Cindy had numerous cuts and bruises on her body, including a black eye and a needle mark on her arm.
Like the last time.
Like the last time. She again claimed she had no memory of the attack, and she had no idea how she ended up there.
Wow.
Now, after this attack, Cindy's friend Agnes and her husband Tom began spending the night at Cindy's now and then at her request.
Okay.
She's just like, hey, can you come stay with me?
Yeah.
I just need somebody here. And on one occasion when they were staying there, everyone woke up around 3 a.m. to a loud noise in the basement.
Ooh.
Cindy ran to Tom and Agnes's door to ask if they heard him too. And Tom was like, yeah, I heard it. It was like a loud thump. And he runs down to the basement to check it out. But when he opens the door, he finds that the basement had been set on fire.
Oh, my God.
So he quickly runs back upstairs to call 911, but the phone lines had been cut. So Tom ran out of the house to go ask a neighbor to call. And when he goes outside, he sees a man standing outside the house on the curb.
Oh.
And he sees this man, so he says, hey, I need you to call help. The house is on fire. But this man just turns and bolts away from the house.
Oh, my God.
So he has to go, to a next door neighbor. He has to call 911. And, they come and get the fire put out. Now, when police begin their investigation of the fire, it's very clearly arson.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take them long to decide that the fire was set deliberately by Cindy.
Okay.
Now, here's why they came to this conclusion.
Okay.
They didn't just come in and say, oh, she set it herself and leave. Police determined that there was only one window the perpetrator could have used to enter the basement and start the fire.
Mm-hmm.
But when they checked the window, there were no fingerprints, and the dust and the dirt on the outside of the window was completely undisturbed.
Oh.
Meaning there's no way anyone came through that window.
Yeah.
And since the fire was started inside the house, they basically say there's no other access to this basement. And since it started inside the house, it had to be Cindy. And then there was the fact that Cindy said she was outside walking her dog when the fire started. And their logic was, if you've been attacked this many times and you've been stalked for this long, why are you comfortable walking your dog at 3 a.m. outside in the dark alone?
Yeah.
Which on the one hand, that's a fair point. But, as a dog owner myself, like when your dog needs to pee, you take your dog out. But I know maybe she was just trying to keep some semblance of normalcy too. Like, I'm going to take my dog outside. I'm not going to let this run my life. But at the same time, I'd be terrified. I don't know if I could do it.
I don't know if I could either. But if somebody was coming to just burn her house down and she was outside, why not just take her out?
Right. Or, if there was someone else that set the fire, who's to say they didn't sneak in the door while Cindy was outside and down into the basement?
That's true.
But then how did they get back out?
Get out?
Because no one went in and out that window.
Jeez.
I know.
This is a hard one.
It's a tough case. Now, after this incident, Cindy's doctor became concerned that she was suicidal, and he had her committed to a psychiatric hospital.
Oh.
The psychiatrist said on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries over the case that the hardest thing for Cindy and what was taking the biggest toll on her was just the fact that nobody believed her.
That would be hard.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's truly happening, yeah.
Yeah. Cindy stayed in the hospital for 10 weeks, and when she came home, she finally admitted to her family and friends that she did know more than what she was saying, and that if police couldn't solve this case, she was going to do it for them. She told her family that she couldn't tell them anything now, but that she would explain everything when it was all over. Now, finally, in October of 1988, Cindy went to police and told them that she believed the person doing all of this to her was her ex-husband, Roy.
Okay.
They had her call and confront him while they recorded the phone call. But Roy just denied all involvement.
Well, yeah.
And he stayed pretty cool and collected. Like, he didn't
get defensive.
He didn't get defensive. He didn't try and explain things away. He just kind of, I had nothing to do with it. I don't know what you're talking about. And in fact, after this, Roy turned over his own strange message from the perpetrator to the police.
How long after this?
Not very long.
Okay.
In fact, I think it was more of a questioning him. It couldn't have been me. I've gotten messages too. Let me show you. But I could be wrong about the exact timeline. It's hard to know. It was the 80s. Now, the message he turned over to police had been left on his answering machine, and it was a raspy voice that said, "Cindy, dead meat, soon." And we actually have a recording of that message that we're going to play for you guys. Now, it's a little hard to hear because, it was taken from an answering machine in the 80s.
Yeah.
But here is the message left on Roy's answering machine. So that was the message.
Ew.
Yep.
Ugh, that's going to haunt me forever.
It's so creepy. And to me, this sounds like a woman's voice.
Kind of. I can see that.
I mean, it could be a guy. I'm not going to say it can't be.
Yeah.
But it's just very...
It's a little bit higher pitched than you would assume.
But, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
It's a crappy answering machine from the 80s. So
That's true. Ugh.
Now, later, Roy said that he believed Cindy was suffering from a split personality and that she was actually doing all of this to herself, but she had no memory of it.
Huh.
But you would think with a 10-week hospitalization that someone there would have noticed and diagnosed that.
Yeah.
That's not something you can hide for 2 months.
Right. Wow.
On October 26th, Cindy came home from work and was attacked in her carport. She was later found in her car, nude from the waist down.
Oh, no.
A nylon stocking was tied around her neck, as usual, and her arms and legs were tied behind her back with a second stocking.
Okay, well, I don't know how she could do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, hog tying yourself can't be that easy.
I don't know. I can't. Sometimes it's hard to just shave. So. Wow.
Duct tape was found over her mouth in an attempt to keep her from breathing.
Oh.
And this attack actually landed Cindy in a coma for a while.
Oh.
But she did survive. She made a full recovery.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, I don't know. I was going to say, on one side, if she's trying to get attention in some way, this is escalating. But I don't know many people that could do that to themselves.
I know. And beat yourself up to the point that you end up in a coma?
Yeah, exactly.
On May 25th, 1989, 6 years and 7 months after the very first threatening phone call, Cindy James disappeared.
Oh, no.
That same day, her car was found in the parking lot of a local shopping mall. Cindy had gone there to deposit her paycheck and do some grocery shopping.
Okay.
Investigators found blood on the driver's side door. They found items from her wallet thrown underneath the car. And in the back, there were still her groceries and a gift that was already wrapped that she had bought to give to someone.
Huh.
For 2 weeks, Cindy's family searched for her and, just held on to the hope that she would be found alive again.
Yeah.
Except this time was different. Cindy's body was finally discovered in the front yard of an abandoned house. She had numerous wounds on her body, including another needle mark in her arm. She was again tied with her hands and feet behind her back, and a black nylon stocking was around her neck and had been used to actually strangle her.
Well, she definitely didn't do that.
However, the autopsy later showed that Cindy's cause of death was actually from an overdose of morphine, sedatives, and a few other drugs. And her time of death also suggested that she died the same day that she disappeared. Now, police quickly determined that Cindy had committed suicide and set the whole scene up herself.
But how?
However, the needle used to inject her was never found.
Oh, imagine that.
And Cindy's body was 1.5 miles away from her car.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way she injected herself with that much morphine and sedatives and then walked 1.5 miles away to tie herself up. And if, the needle wasn't at the crime scene, logically, if you're assuming she did this to herself, she injected it before she even got there.
Right.
So.
That's.
Yeah. However, police explain that part away by saying she most likely ingested the morphine rather than injecting it, which would have given her more time to get there before the effects set in. However, they never actually found any proof of that. And they also found no proof that Cindy herself had ever purchased black nylon stockings.
Well, that should have been the first thing they figured out anyway, because she's been tied with black stockings several times.
The whole time.
Yeah.
Now, they do investigate her ex-husband, Roy, and her boyfriend, Pat, but were never able to find any evidence against either one of them. The official autopsy was not ruled accident or murder or even suicide.
Really?
It was simply ruled an unknown event.
Okay.
Now, the place that Cindy's body was found was right near a busy sidewalk. It was a very high traffic area, and Ozzy actually believed that there was no way she was there for 2 weeks without a single person seeing her body.
So somebody.
He thinks that her body was dumped there later.
Okay, yeah.
Cindy's parents, just firmly believe that she was murdered.
Yeah.
They said that she loved them and her dog dearly, and there's no way she would put any of them through that herself.
Yeah.
There's no way she would have tortured her own dog.
Yeah.
Her father was convinced that the investigation was so focused on putting the blame on Cindy herself and proving that it was a suicide that they didn't even bother trying to find the real perpetrator.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
They were just done and done.
And unfortunately, that's where it ends.
Oh my God.
Cindy's case has never been solved, but then it wasn't treated as a homicide either.
Right.
Which leaves us with the question of, was Cindy actually being stalked, harassed, attacked, and then eventually murdered? Or did Cindy stage all of these things herself and commit suicide?
Murder.
Well,
we're
going to talk about a few things. First, let's talk about the police investigation.
Yes, please.
Now, like I said, in the beginning at least, police did a lot for Cindy.
Yeah, and it does sound like it.
They didn't just write her off. Even when they started to not believe her anymore, they were still doing surveillance. Right. They were still responding to her calls.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't just ignore her. And altogether, Cindy had almost 100 incident reports filed with them.
Holy cow.
However, through the entire nearly 7 years, they never found a single suspect, a single fingerprint, any form of evidence at all. There was never anyone to corroborate her. No one else ever saw the person or witnessed the harassment or the attacks other than the fire.
Right.
And according to Neil Hall with the Vancouver Sun, it's estimated that the police spent nearly $1.5 million investigating Cindy's harassment case. God. Just in man hours, days and days of 24-hour surveillance, the tracing equipment they used, just all the stuff like that.
7 years, that adds up.
Yeah. However, that being said, by the time Cindy died, they were so convinced Cindy was doing this to herself, they wouldn't even look at it as a homicide.
But at that point, you should.
You have to.
Yeah.
Like, you have to check out every possible scenario before you can say it didn't happen.
Yeah. Even just the way they found her body.
Yeah.
Plus,
there was the not even checking for fingerprints on the knife.
Yeah.
Like you said, even if they're convinced you won't find anyone else's, it would just prove their point.
Right.
And, maybe they had more information then that we don't have now that led them to this conclusion that she was doing it to herself. But, maybe it was just the ongoing, it's Cindy again attitude that led to the frustration from police and that just clouded their judgment. I mean, 7 years trying to find one person as they're actively attacking someone.
Right.
And leaving zero evidence behind. It's got to make officers a little crazy.
Yeah. And it would get old.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it.
Uh-huh.
But some of that.
It's so hard.
I know.
And, also some of their points were valid, such as the dog walking at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And it does seem strange to go outside on your own at night when you're so afraid that you're having friends stay at your house with you.
But maybe she let her guard down a little bit because she had friends over.
Maybe she did. Maybe she thought they're here. He's not going to do anything. He never does anything when there's people here. Maybe that was it.
Wow.
Then there was the polygraphs.
Yeah.
Were they inconclusive because she wasn't being truthful? Or was she just holding back information and trying to protect her family? Or was she just straight up lying about all of it?
That seems like a lot of work to lie about it.
It is. But then there's that lack of evidence.
I know.
In 7 years, they found nothing, not even a trace of the person doing this.
Yeah.
Like, how is that even possible?
You would think they would slip up at some point in 7 years.
Either he was the greatest criminal ever.
Right.
Or maybe it was sloppy police work. I mean, obviously they stopped looking for evidence at a certain point.
Yeah, but they would have found something.
Or did they not find anything because there wasn't anything to find?
Yeah.
But then again, maybe they wrote off a woman who actually needed their help.
Yeah.
I read in several sources that Cindy kept private journals. Mm-hmm. And in these journals, she wrote about how alone she felt and how awful the whole ordeal was for her and the toll it was taking on her. And about incidents she hadn't even told people about.
Oh, wow.
Plus, there's the idea that Cindy was able to do all of these things to herself.
Yeah.
Drug herself, tie herself up multiple times, sending herself letters, faking phone calls, even going so far as to commit suicide just to stick to your lie.
That's the biggest one for me. Like what do you prove? What point are you proving by doing that?
Right. What is it for? What would she be getting out of this? I mean, because attention, sympathy.
Even if it's attention, though, she's dead. What attention is she going to get?
I know. I don't
understand.
Although I did read in a couple of places that there was a theory that Cindy didn't actually mean to kill herself and she just used too much
overdosed
of the drugs. Or even the theory that the killer did the same thing. He didn't mean to kill Cindy. They just used too much of the drugs.
Right. Oh, I didn't think about that.
But I mean, like you said, what would the motivation be for faking this for 7 years?
Yeah.
I mean, mental illness maybe? But you would think after being married to a psychiatrist for 19 years, he would have seen some signs of it.
Maybe he did. Maybe that's why they divorced. But he didn't say that, did he?
No, he didn't. He never said that.
Wow.
He, claimed she might have had the multiple personalities.
Yeah.
But that was it. He never claimed anything else. So
weird.
Or even at the psychiatric hospital. Someone there would have noticed delusions and a mental illness of that magnitude, but nobody did.
Yeah.
And 2 of those attacks landed her in the hospital.
Right.
Beating yourself up that badly would be some serious commitment.
No kidding.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's just improbable.
Yeah,
Then there are the circumstances around her death. She had groceries and a gift in the back of the car.
Yeah.
Why would you bother with all of that if you're going to commit suicide?
Exactly.
I mean, if we agree with police, we have to believe that Cindy injected herself with the drugs, discarded the needle in an unknown location, or took them orally, which, like I said, was never proven. Then she injured herself enough to leave blood on the car door, scattered the contents of her wallet underneath the car, then walked 1.5 miles after all of that to an abandoned house where she hogtied herself, strangled herself with a stalking, beat herself up at some point.
Yeah.
All before the drugs set in and killed her.
And if she's doing all of this, I mean, if this was her in the grocery store parking lot, somebody would have seen her do something. I would assume.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But then if somebody grabbed her, nobody saw that either.
That's true. But that could have been... Grabbing her is a lot quicker than her getting out, I don't know, busting her face in the car, throwing all of her stuff underneath.
Mm-hmm. And police actually brought in a knot expert.
Huh.
And they were trying to prove that she could have done this to herself. So they brought in this knot expert, and this person was able to tie the exact same knots in the same way in 3 minutes.
Huh.
Which they said she would have had about 15 minutes after the drugs to get all of this stuff done before they kicked in. And, with 15 minutes, if it only takes 3 to tie yourself up, that's time. But then, there's a mile and a half away. Did she know about this abandoned house ahead of time? Like, did she have a destination? Did she just walk? Like, did she know about this house? Did she have a destination? Did she just walk straight there? Did she just walk until she stopped somewhere?
I mean, now my health is probably not as great as Cindy's was, but it takes me a lot longer than 15 minutes to walk a mile and a half and get all this stuff done.
You would have to literally sprint.
Yeah.
To be there in 15 minutes.
Which would make the drugs kick in sooner, I would think.
Yeah, your heart's pumping, your blood's circulating faster.
That's weird. I don't know. And the knot expert. Well, yeah, it took him 3 minutes. He's a knot expert.
Right?
I mean...
I'm not a knot expert. I probably couldn't do it in 3 minutes.
No, I can't hardly curl my hair the right way in a mirror, so there's no way I could hog tie myself up from behind.
While drugged. After beating yourself up and strangling yourself.
Yeah.
Like...
That seems like a ton of work.
It is so much work. And for what?
Yeah.
To prove your point, but... I mean,
you're not going to be there to see it.
Right. I don't know.
So weird.
But there's plenty of people out there who do believe that's what happened.
Yeah.
And honestly, despite everything we know about the case, the fact is there was no evidence to show one way or the other.
Yeah.
Then there's the ex-husband, Roy,
right,
who Cindy actually named as her tormentor.
Right.
And as a psychiatrist, he would have known how to mess with people's heads.
Yeah.
And how to come across as genuine on the phone.
I did think about that.
Also, like you pointed out, he didn't turn over that message to the police until they questioned him.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me feels more like it can't be me. See, it happened to me too.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, there's no way to know who left that message.
There's no way to prove him wrong or right.
Right. It very well could have been the actual perpetrator.
Yeah.
Or it could have been Cindy.
This is really throwing me off.
It's such a tough one, man. But if it really was not Roy, why would Cindy accuse him?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the stress of all of it caused her to just truly believe it was him, even if she didn't have any proof.
Yeah.
You know how you can get it in your head, it's got to be. It couldn't be anybody else.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, and did it ever say why they divorced?
No, it just said Cindy was ready to move on with her life. That's the only bit of information I could get about the divorce.
Because I wondered maybe if, he was like that manipulative type of husband or something, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe she was just over it and she left. And I don't know. I was just trying to think of some other reason. That's so wild. I don't know.
I mean...
You've got me on this one.
Maybe she really did know it was him the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's the information she was withholding from the police.
But why withhold it? I mean, I understand. I mean, but at this point?
Like, after I've been attacked.
In the hospital, in a coma.
Even if they've threatened my family. Like, if the police have him in custody, he can't hurt my family.
Yeah.
But then maybe she knew, like, there's no evidence. They're not going to be able to do anything about it. So, also there's the coincidence of all this starting just 4 months after she separated from him.
Oh, yeah.
Now, at this point in time, Cindy's parents have both passed away. Oh. But her sister Melanie continues looking for answers. And she actually wrote a book about her sister's death called Who Killed My Sister, My Friend. Mm-hmm. Melanie firmly believes her sister was murdered. To contrast this, Neil Hall, a credible crime reporter who followed the case from the very beginning, also wrote a book about the case called The Deaths of Cindy James. But he firmly believes that Cindy committed suicide.
Oh, boy. So what you're saying is we need a book club on Patreon.
Sounds like it.
Okay. Because I'm going to be picking up both of those books.
Yep. So was Cindy James stalked and harassed for 7 years, then brutally murdered? Or did she stage the whole thing and commit suicide?
Oh, wow.
At this point, we'll probably never have the answer.
Yeah.
And all anybody can do is speculate.
Wow. Well, we'd love to know what you think.
Absolutely. If you guys have an opinion, shoot us a message, comment it on our social media posts, join our Discord, and have a conversation with us.
I need to, I don't know, maybe somebody has a better answer I can piggyback off of, because I don't have one this time.
I don't either.
I don't even have a dumb one. Like, I can't even say aliens. Like, this is...
Yeah. This one is crazy, because you either have to believe Cindy did all of this to herself for 7 years and killed herself to commit to this lie, or that some perfect criminal was stalking her for 7 years and never left a trace of evidence.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for either.
Me either.
Thanks for listening.
Like us on Facebook at True Crimes and Weird Times Podcast.
Follow us on Instagram at True Crimes Weird Times.
Email us your stories at truecrimesweirdtimes@gmail.com.
Can't wait for the next episode? Check out our Patreon for bonus episodes and more.
And if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Bye!